Hey guys, how's it going? It's Danconia and welcome back to the Overwatch League Roundup 2020 Week 16 Meta Preview. So this is a very interesting one. We're going into Week 16 of the Overwatch League, and it's not really a regular week, is it? Because this is where we will see the May Melee, the tournament that they had been promising from the end of last month. This new format, this replacement for the mid-season tournament, because we were meant to get a mid-season tournament, but we didn't get it. But this tournament will have fairly large repercussions on the standings, because if you do well in this tournament, you get wins on your record. So it makes a big difference. It's not just prize money. So it still kind of acts as a regular week, but it's going to be very interesting because this is going to be the first week since week 5, I believe, where we are not going to have hero pools. There will be no heroes banned this week. So that means we will possibly see a meta develop, or we might possibly not. It's going to be very interesting to see how teams react. Now, obviously last week, May, Tracer, Orisa and Moira were banned, and it did kind of change things up. With May being banned, that means a lot of teams that, normally play a lot of May, like Florida Mayhem and London Spitfire, didn't really, well, I would say they didn't know what to do. Florida Mayhem knew what to do. London didn't at all, although it didn't look that brilliant on the Echo, whereas Yaki for the Florida Mayhem certainly did. But this week, you will be able to see teams play what they want to play. That's going to be the crucial thing here. There is going to be no, this team has their comfort picks banned, so they're going to be rubbish. And you will see this in the Asia tournament picks, because we know who has picked who, right? And Shanghai and New York Excelsior got the first 2 picks, and they both avoided Seoul Dynasty, even though Seoul Dynasty were the lowest seeded team in the competition. The New York Excelsior picked Chengdu Hunters, and the Shanghai Dragons picked London Spitfire. And the reason for that is because, yeah, Seoul Dynasty were trash in week 15, and they were trash in week 13. But that's when they couldn't play their comfort picks. In this May tournament, Seoul will be able to play their comfort picks, their May, their McCree, things like that, Orisa, Sigma, things like that, right? And so, they will possibly be more powerful than what they were last week, perhaps more like the Seoul we saw in week 14, rather than what we've seen in 15 and 13. So, yeah, it's going to be very interesting. It's going to benefit some teams and not others. London Spitfire are another example. London Spitfire, I think, this season have heavily relied on the May, and look better when they are able to play the May. And so they will have a better time than they perhaps would have, but they are going up against Shanghai, so, that's kind of the thing. But going to NA, for example, we're going to see Toronto versus Vancouver. That's the only sealed one in at the moment because there's more teams and there has to be a qualification. And I don't think, no hero pools is going to affect that too much. I think Toronto should have enough to see off Vancouver, but no hero pools means quite a major thing. Some teams, I worry, might try and force their comfort picks that we've seen previously. Florida Mayhem are an example of this, where they used to have that comfort pick of McCree May or Reaper May, and I worry whether they might stick to that a little bit too much. We've seen really good looks from the Florida Mayhem when they haven't been playing the May, when we've seen Yaki on the Echo, and I would like to see Florida Mayhem keep switching it up, because I think that could really catch teams off guard. I'm not too worried about teams like the San Francisco Shock or the Philadelphia Fusion. I'm pretty confident they will go into matches, play whatever they want, and whatever is going to get them the win. And they're not going to get stuck on a certain comp and just get kind of like very focused on that comp and not switch it. But I think some teams could possibly have that happen to them. It'll be interesting to see what Guangzhou Charge do as well, because they've been really good during these hero pools recently, and there is no hero pool now, so they can still use that diversity. So I think Guangzhou Charge are going to be pretty good. Well, they're pretty good already because they've already got that bye, considering they were champions for May in the Asian region. But again, it'll be very interesting to see what sort of comps come back. I am of the opinion that May will probably come back, and we might see May McCree, we might see May Ash. We might see May Widowmaker if we see Junkertown. But will some teams go against the grain, not play the May and play the Echo? Because I can't imagine Mei Echo. I can't imagine that somehow. So it'll be very interesting to see what teams do with just the freedom of the entire hero list. And then when you think of the tank line we had before hero pools was introduced was Reinhardt D.Va. So will we go back to Reinhardt D.Va, or will we see teams continue with the dive that we've seen? We've seen some Hammond D.Va dive, we've seen some Winston D.Va dive, we've seen quite a bit of Sombra recently. Are we going to see quite a bit of Sombra? Are we going to see Sol run the Orisa Sigma, which is something they've looked very comfortable on? So there's a lot of questions to be asked, and it'll be interesting. It'll be very much, we will see what the individual playstyles of the teams are in this May tournament, I think. Because it's going to tell us whether some teams just absolutely full send in a comp, or whether they are really, really flexible. And that's a question we have about some teams like Florida and people like that, where we don't really know whether they're all that flexible. They're kind of flexible with the Echo, with the Mei, but are they truly flexible? And that'll be really interesting. Whereas some teams, we already know it. Newark itself have been trying to run Who Are You on the Genji into things for a while, so I hope they don't go doing that, otherwise they might have a tough time. But, you know, NYXL are fairly flexible. We've seen good and different looks from the San Francisco Shock, from the Philadelphia Fusion as well. There's other teams I could name. But also you've got teams that in this tournament will be able to play their comfort picks. Valiant, for example, they can keep KSP on the Ashe. And I think the Hammond actually worked pretty well for them last week against the Toronto Defiant as well. So it should be very interesting. But another team to mention is Atlanta. Atlanta have looked very good on double barrier, I believe. So again, they'll have that re-enabled for this week. And I think if they'd had the Orisa, they might have tried to run more double barrier against San Francisco Shock last week, and they may not have necessarily got swept quite as badly. But San Francisco Shock were very darn good in that match, so I'm not going to take too much away from Atlanta there. It was a Shock being very darn good. With some teams, I know I'm basing this more off teams than I am off the actual heroes, because it's very difficult to tell. And I'm not sure whether it will make too much of a difference. I don't think there'll be any team... Well, it will be the thing of no team has the excuse of, well, it was just a rough hero pool week. Sol, for example, I'm looking at you. There's no excuse. This week, you should show us the best Sol Dynasty there is. Because you should be able to show us your most comfortable looks. And I suppose another thing to mention is it's up to the enemy team to perhaps counter that and be big-brained about things and force them off that comp, because if they do, they could possibly win the match. Seoul Dynasty are taking on the Hangzhou Spark. So, Hangzhou Spark have just added Architect. I'm not sure what's going on with Gushwei, because he's got a visa issue, but we will see what happens. I believe they are still competing in the tournament, though. There was rumours that they would be pulling out, but I think they still are competing. But it'll be very interesting to see what happens, because... You know, with no hero pools, I would say Seoul would win that one and win it fairly comfortably, but I don't know. Hangzhou looked fairly decent last week, and I don't trust Seoul. I'm not going to lie, I don't trust Seoul to get the job done anymore. They've looked very, very inconsistent. But the bonus for Seoul is just they can play whatever they want. And the two things I think we've seen Seoul look the best on is Tracer Sombra and Mei McCree, or Mei Reaper. So, I think that's a big, big benefit for Seoul Dynasty coming into this May tournament. And it'll be a big benefit for other teams as well. But I hope we do continue to see the flexibility from teams. I don't want us to get into this concrete, well, everyone is playing exactly the same thing. And I don't think we will, because they won't have enough time to just concrete say that is the meta and everyone's going to play it, like we used to before we had hero pools introduced. Because before we had hero pools introduced in the early weeks of this season, we knew what was going to be run. It was normally Mei McCree, it was normally D.Va Reinhardt, and it was normally, I think, Ana Lucio. I think, although I might be wrong. But that's what we saw. We saw an incredible amount of it. But now that hero pools has been introduced, a lot of teams are developing their own styles. And some teams need to stick to their own styles, otherwise they will get punished. because I think some teams are much better running their own style than trying to run silly metas and things like that. I think some teams just need to stick to what they're good at, run it, and more often than not, we've seen teams who run their comfort picks actually come out on top. Because very often, if some teams get drawn into a mirror, get drawn into what other teams want to play, it just flops badly. So I think that it's going to be very interesting. It's going to be very, very, very interesting. We saw it actually earlier on, I think, in the season from Toronto, where they got drawn into these May McCree comps, where actually they looked better on the Sombra Doomfist dive at that time, I believe. And I just felt myself screaming at them, just play the Sombra Doomfist dive. It's what you're good at, play it, and you'll get results. Maybe not against the big teams in the league, but you're probably not going to get those results anyway, especially not if you were going to go in the mirror matchup. So I'd like to see some ingenuity. I'd like to see some creativeness from the teams. And maybe, just maybe, we will see some upsets. But it's a very odd meta preview this week because there's no hero pools, isn't there? I can't say, well, we're going to start with the supports and say this hero is banned, because there isn't. And it's going to be incredibly interesting, and I'm sure we're going to probably see hero bans based off of the May tournament for week 17 in June. So that's going to be very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. But I'm going to leave it here for this one. So thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you'd like to give a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. See you then.